let's talk a little bit about basics on gear that you want to carry if you're going to be spending time off-road in the mountains or in environments where you need to rely on yourself. For me, this property is at 3,000 feet elevation in the Cascade Mountains, so we're planning for snow in winter. Always carry snowshoes. This is especially important on my snowmobile because if you get stranded, you need to make sure you have a way to pack out. Especially in the middle of winter, we can get 4 or 5 feet of snow up here. You do not want to try to find a way out without snowshoes to help make that job a lot easier. Because I always carry a chainsaw and extra fuel. That's mainly because we get down trees fairly often, especially in the wintertime where there's more wind. Those trees that might be standing deadwood come down and you have to clear your own path throughout the forest. So always having a good reliable chainsaw that's in good maintenance as well as the fuel to go along with it. I personally always carry 2 sets of chains. The thing that's particularly challenging about getting to this property, especially heading into the winter, is it's a 5-mile drive once you leave the county road. And the first, I would say probably 4 miles is at a relatively low elevation. So it gets warmer, which means we get icy conditions much more as the snow heats up and then at nighttime refreezes, creating ice. So for me, having chains is very, very helpful, especially in the early portion of the journey. Having 4 chains on this truck can allow me to get into a lot of areas that obviously wouldn't be able to otherwise. An alternative strategy to that is, of course, running with lower PSI on your tires, which effectively makes a larger footprint and helps you stay on top and have more area for grip versus a higher inflated tire, which is going to have a smaller point of contact with the ground or with the snow. Not to mention, the passes that I come over to get to this property require chains on vehicles, or at least to be carrying chains. I believe it's between November to April. Now this particular set of chains I'm a big fan of because they're very easy to install. They are also self-tightening. So if you're ever looking for chains on a bigger tire, these are 35 by 12.5, and these are 233-7D. They're diamond SUV, diamond pattern. I also like that because it gives you a little bit of traction for steering versus the patterns that just go straight across. I've only had these for 1 season, but I was happy with them in that year. I always want to carry a backup shell. This one is mostly waterproof and definitely windproof. This is for emergencies and having a backup layer of protection for both wind and rain. Of course, we keep backup fuel clearly marked for the 2-stroke for the chainsaw. I also always carry a handsaw, mostly for those smaller branches where it's just easier to get out the handsaw, cut them down to get your path, whether it's for your truck or snowmobile. Now, one very commonly overlooked item is windshield fluid. Just on my drive today, there would have been multiple times on that trip where I would not have been able to see out my front windshield without this due to having just dirty roads. And when the windshield wipers go, they're just smudging instead of clearing. So I always make sure, especially in the wintertime, that I have the non-freezing. This is rated for -20. I have a full tank in the truck and I keep a backup because you can literally be blinded out here on the freeway or off-road if you do not have spray. A collapsible shovel, very good for when you get stuck or just making, clearing out snow, clearing out your tires. It's been very handy on a number of occasions. I also carry a winch, and this may be something I need to upgrade and something I need to be a little bit more of a professional outdoorsman for, but I just carry a winch in my truck bed and it's my backup if I'm really stuck in a situation. The thing I like about having it not mounted on my truck is I have both a receiver on the front and the back of this truck. So I've used it in both places depending on my situation. That bit of flexibility is definitely nice, but it is a bit of a pain because I use an external battery and I just go 3 feet at a time. So it's there for emergencies. It's great to have, and having the versatility front to back is nice. The downsides are it's taking up room in my bed. It's a bit inconvenient, but it's great to have when you need it. Spare fuel is a must. I also always make sure that I have a full tank when I'm coming up here in my truck. Not only because, of course, you don't want to get stranded, but also if you do find yourself in a survival situation, you want a full gas tank for the very minimum so you have heat throughout the night. 5 gallons is my backup. I use this for a generator. I use this for the truck. I use this for the chainsaw. You always want to have spare fuel on board. Next is a survival kit of basically food and water. So I have electrolyte water, coconut water in here because I find that when I'm out laboring, expending energy, using my muscles, that the electrolytes really help me not to cramp. I do have a problem with that otherwise. And having a food source, an energy source, and supplements all in here, both for normal use but also emergency survival use as well. Next, I always carry traction pads. They are a lifesaver in the snow, especially when it's icy and I can't get traction. Last year I carried 2 of these. This year I'm carrying 4. They're much easier to use than setting up the winch. Airing down tires may allow me to prevent some of the situations where I used these last year, but definitely a very convenient way to get out of a situation you're otherwise stuck in. I also use these in combination with the winch if I'm really stuck, especially if I've dug myself into an icy ditch or hole by spinning the tires. I use these as a ramp to help myself get out of that hole. It makes a big difference in what the winch is able to do. So good for various reasons that way. Now I'm also always going to carry an extra set of gloves and boots. These are the first items that get wet, and they're the most comforting to have dry. So I'm always going to carry at least 1 extra pair per trip. Now another very important item to carry is a fire extinguisher. And I actually found this out the hard way. Last year we were carrying the external battery that I normally keep in my cab that I use for that winch in the bed of this truck during a boating trip. What ended up happening is my trailer was not packed full, which it normally is, as you can tell from earlier in the video. That battery turned on its side and actually came into contact with a piece of metal. We had a fairly significant fire in the bed, in the truck bed. The wood in this bed is the last that I'm unloading for the season, so that's not something I typically carry, but that's my load for this trip to kind of get us stocked up for the start of the winter time. And on some trips, I'll be accessing this property via snowmobile. This right now we only have a couple inches of snow, so I was able to get here on the truck. But this is what I strapped to the back of my snowmobile, and this includes everything from the supplies that we're going to need on this trip for food, fuel like small propane tanks. I'll have water, straps, and other goods for the individual trip. Now lastly, I always carry 2 boxes in this truck year-round, regardless of the season. I like to use small, shallow boxes because they're much more easy to access what you need and you don't spend a ton of time digging through. I used to find that if I had a deep box, what was on the bottom I wouldn't touch for years and years and it would just sit there for no real reason. For me, on this box, I'm mostly carrying gear for strapping and power. So I have tie downs for the truck bed, I have bungee cords, both are great for different uses and purposes. We have gloves, straps, and some traction strap-ons for shoes. This box is a little bit more related to off-roading and potentially creating traction and getting unstuck. In here we have soft shackles. So if you're ever strapping a winch or doing other load-bearing ties, these soft shackles are better than metal because if you do have some form of a failure, this is much less likely to hurt you if it's flying at you than a metal hitch or a larger, heavier mass. Here I also carry the controls for the winch, as well as a few very basic tools, jumper cables, extension cord, and our air compressor / air pump. This thing is awesome. This is a 100 PSI rated dual motor, both 120 volt, 12 volts, and battery powered. The other thing I love about this is you set it to a PSI and you let it run and it shuts itself off. So if I air down my tires, These are 35-inch tires. They take a good amount of air and they can take quite a while to inflate, especially if you're running down at a very low PSI to try to gain that traction in an off-roading situation. This will allow me to set the pump and continue packing and continue going about my day. I can plug it into the truck, or if it won't reach, although this comes with a very generous cord and I can reach all 4 tires from my middle console. If that wasn't the case, it also comes with a battery, which makes it awesome for both boating applications. You can fill up inner tubes. You can use this as a air hose, and it's just been a very, very convenient little emergency tool. It also has flashing lights, and if you're stranded on the side of the road, can be used as an indicator and a warning sign. So this is something I've been very happy with. Definitely would recommend carrying. Other items in here would include things like oil, 2-cycle oil, a backup quart for the truck oil, and just general maintenance and emergency related mechanical type items. So let me know, what would you add to this list? What am I not carrying that you'd recommend, or what do you think's overkill? So comment, like, subscribe, let's start a community.